Hey, we're back again. 5th chapter, book of James, the last chapter in our Bible study on the book of James. I hope you're really getting something out of it. I know I have. I've been really enjoying this. If you haven't read the 5th chapter yet, please stop the video and do it now so that you can, understand the flow of what we're getting into. All right, I trust that you read the 5th chapter. Let's get into this. As you know that James is a very practical book full of wisdom, and many of the things that he wrote, of course, to every believer. However, there's some things in there that he deals with that may not directly pertain to you. And what I mean by that is it pertains to you if you're a believer. However, if you're not walking in a manner that he directly speaks to, then you know that you're doing well. And that portion isn't speaking directly about you per se. However, it's still something that we need to take into account. And you'll see this in these first few verses of the 5th chapter. This is James chapter 5. I'm going to read verses 1 through 6. It says, "Come now, you rich, weep and howl for your miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver are corroded, and their corrosion will be a witness against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have heaped up treasure in the last days. Indeed, the wages of the laborer who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, cry out, and the cries of the reapers have reached the ears of the Lord of the Sabaoth. You have lived on the earth in pleasure and luxury. You have fattened your hearts as in the day of slaughter. You have condemned, you have murdered the just. He does not resist you." Now, see, this is what I was saying. If you're not a person that has a great deal of wealth, or you haven't come by that wealth by fraud, then of course it speaks to you of what not to do. But it doesn't speak directly to you like you're doing it. However, the principles in there are for everybody. Because it doesn't matter whether you're wealthy or you're poor. If we're using people just to get ahead, then it's wrong, as you see in these first few verses. However, this is speaking directly to those who have obtained wealth and are believers. And again, it's not a sin to be rich. That's not what James is saying here. It's a sin when we use our riches and our wealth incorrectly, or we gain our riches and our wealth incorrectly. Being wealthy is not a sin. You don't find that in the scriptures. It's what you do with it or how you get it that can or cannot be sin. So let's look at this. Once again, James is not saying that having wealth is a bad thing. Being wealthy does not automatically make one a sinner. In verses 4 and 6 show us the context. Now remember, context is everything. So in verses 4 and 6 shows us the context of what James is saying. He is speaking to the wealthy that have kept back the wages of the laborer by fraud. They have also condemned and murdered the just, even when the just had not resisted the rich. They haven't done anything to deserve it. Now again, back to what we spoke about earlier in the book of James, I'm not so sure that he is speaking to people who have actually physically murdered somebody, however he might be. But even if it's murder in the sense of, like we were talking about before, character assassination, remember when, let's paint this picture here. A wealthy person hires some people to work for him. And at the end of their work, the wealthy person agreed to pay them. So when the work is finished, he doesn't want to, imagine if he doesn't want to pay them. So he's going to have to, by fraud, hold back the wages. How does he do that? Well, often, and we've even seen this in our day and age, they slander. They will slander. Well, I didn't pay him because of, and then they slander. We've seen this so many times in different lines of work. I was just reading an article just the other day about how somebody came in to buy a cake. And the person made the cake that the other people wanted. They said, this is what we want, this is how we want it. So they made the cake according to their description. When they come in to pick up the cake, They said, this is not the cake we ordered. And they read back the order. No, this is what you've ordered. It's right here on paper. Well, this is not what we imagined it would look like. We wanted this to look like this. We want that to look like that. And so they changed the whole order. So the bakers went and remade the cake. So they came back to get the second cake. And they said, this is not what we wanted. Well, wait a minute. Here's the original order. Here's how you changed it. We did exactly what you said. Well, this is not what we want. We're not paying for it. But give us the cake. They wanted the cake, but they didn't want to pay for it. Even though they could prove, the bakers could prove that it was exactly what they wanted twice. See, that's fraud. So there's a little bit of slander or character assassination. You don't know what you're doing, baker. You don't know how to bake a cake. Just give us this cake for free. And so that's kind of, in a nutshell, the picture that James is painting here. You hire somebody to do a job, and then you don't want to pay. Well, how do you get out of paying? We have to convince yourself or convince others that they didn't do a good job, and that usually comes through character assassination, slander, gossip, whatever. So you see how James ties all this in, and he continues in this flow. So he's not coming against people of wealth. He is saying, how are you getting it? If you're doing it fraudulently, if you're doing it through slander, if you're doing it by robbing from people, hiring them and not paying them what you agreed, then that's the people that James is talking about. That's the person that he is saying, you better weep and howl for your miseries that are coming upon you. In other words, he's going to hold you accountable. He's not going to let you get away with this. He says, your riches are corrupted, your garments are moth-eaten. Why is he painting this ugly picture of these wealthy people? Not because of their wealth, but how they obtained their wealth. So again, in verse 4 and verse 6, it gives us the context for the people that James is writing to, those types of wealthy people. The people that have held back wages through fraud. The people who have condemned, murdered, even verbally murdered. And these people didn't even resist. They didn't do anything to deserve it. They didn't fight. They didn't fuss. They didn't do anything to deserve it. So that's the context, and that's what James is writing about, not wealth in general. If you happen to be a wealthy person or come from a wealthy family, well, praise God. Thank God for your wealth. But keep in mind that you have a responsibility with that wealth. Not to just give it all away, but to benefit others. It's not just for your benefit, it's for the benefit of others as well. It says here in verse 5, you have lived on the earth in pleasure and luxury. You have fattened your hearts as in the day of slaughter. You have condemned, you have murdered the just. He does not resist you. The wealthy and affluent have certain responsibilities because of their wealth. Regardless of how you got it, if you worked really hard, you came from nothing, you still have a responsibility to do something positive and righteous with that wealth beyond just have it for yourself or to spend it on your own luxuries. Now, please don't misunderstand. I'm not saying, and James is not saying, that if you're wealthy, you can't enjoy your wealth. That's not the point. But as we pointed out in the other chapters, if you have wealth and you're spending it just merely only on your own luxury and nobody around you is benefited, then you're not fully using your wealth. The reason why God allowed you to have it, you're not using it to benefit others and to bring other people up. Your wealth is not just to bring you up, but to bring others up. I'm not saying that you just give it to them for free. That's not what I'm saying. But like he was pointing out, you pay the laborers for the work they do, and you pay them very well, or you should. So you have a responsibility with your wealth, and it doesn't matter where you are on the financial scheme. If you're even considered to be a poor person, you have a responsibility to use wisely what you do have. If you're middle class, you have a responsibility to use wisely what you have, and especially if you're wealthy. All of us, it doesn't matter who we are, we have a responsibility to steward what God has blessed us with wisely, okay? The wealthy are to find ways to increase the value of others. They are to find ways to use their wealth to increase the value of others, including the poor, and especially the poor. Now, again, that does not mean you just get a stack of $100 bills and go give them away to whoever wants it. That doesn't increase their value. What increases a person's value is when we invest into them and they increase in value. Then by doing that, they'll be able to go out and get wealth of their own. But if you just hand people money, as we've seen with our welfare system, it just doesn't really work. It doesn't bring people up. It keeps people locked into poverty more than it does bring people out of poverty. And so the wealthy, instead of just handing out money, should be figuring out ways to increase the value of the people around them, including the poor, and so that they, including the poor, can come out of poverty by their own work and what you've invested into them, the value you've put into them. Let me give you an example. That's the whole idea behind our discipleship and mentoring program that we'll be starting real soon. And what that is designed to do is so that not just myself, but the other leaders in the church, and I'm going to do my best to bring others, even outside, to pour into the people that attend these courses, so that their value, spiritually speaking especially, but in other areas as well, will increase, so that they can go out and do maybe what I've done or what other leaders have done, or maybe we can unlock some doors in their own life for them to do something even maybe different and hopefully much higher. See, my job is not fully complete on this earth until I leave behind people that are doing far more than I ever did. Okay, I don't want my children, spiritually or naturally, just to have the life that I have. I want them to live far beyond. So I have to increase their value as much as I possibly can so that they can go out and do what I've done, but on a much higher scale. I'm not trying to create clones of me. I want them to be better. But if by trying to make them better, I have to give them at least what I have so that they can take it, run with it, and invest it to get more. I hope that's, and I don't mean that just in the financial sense. I mean that in the spiritual sense, in the natural sense, wisdom, all of these things. Anything and everything that I have that is a good, that's a positive, that's righteous. I want my kids, if you will, spiritual and otherwise, to have. I want them to have everything that I have. I want to pour myself out until there's really very little, if anything, left. You get the picture. So, just like it is in spiritual things, even in natural things, in the area of wealth and finance, the wealthy have a responsibility to those around them to pour into them to increase their value. Okay? And again, it is not a sin to enjoy the fruit of one's labors on pleasure and luxury. That's not a sin. But your wealth is to benefit others less fortunate, okay, as well. I'm not saying necessarily you have to bring everybody into a place of luxury. You teach them how to go get what you have. As God blesses us, we cannot forget those still struggling. Or maybe they're not just struggling. Maybe they're just on a different plane or a lower plane. Let's say financially, because this is what this is dealing with. If I'm a billionaire, it is my duty as a believer in Jesus Christ to teach others how to become a billionaire. Okay? If I'm a millionaire, again, in other words, it's my duty to teach people how to get to where I'm at and then become the brace to push them further. Bring them to where I'm at and then help push them further to the best of my ability. That's spiritually, that's financially, that's in marriages, that's in every level of life. Okay? That's a principle that we should live by. So look at verse 7. I'm going to read James 4, 7 through 12, where it says, "Therefore, be patient." Now, that's like a four-letter word to me. "Be patient, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, waiting patiently for it until it receives the early and the latter rain. You also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Do not grumble against one another, brethren, lest you be condemned. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. My brethren, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord as an example of suffering and patience. Indeed, we count them blessed who endure. You have heard of the perseverance of Job and seen the end intended by the Lord, that the Lord is very compassionate and merciful. Verse 12, but above all, my brethren, do not swear either by heaven or earth, by any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no, no, lest you fall into judgment. Now this is chock full of things that we can take off on, and I'm doing my best to keep at least the 5th chapter study concise, so I won't get into everything. But remember, right after dealing with the wealthy and how they treat others, especially to gain more wealth, James says, therefore be patient, brethren. James is pointing out that God's blessing will come, but we must patiently wait for them. Okay, because remember, he just said and showed how some of the wealthy are going out and gaining more wealth by fraud, by not paying their laborers as they should, even through murder and such. So he is saying, listen, be patient. In other words, don't out of your impatience go out and do something that's wrong. He's pointing out the blessing will come, but we must patiently wait for them, the blessings. If we go and abuse others in an attempt to gain wealth and blessing, then it's not the blessing of the Lord. See, this is something that many have to remember and keep in mind. If we gain wealth, finances, position in life, position in a company, in a church, through stepping on other people, putting other people down, it doesn't matter how much you gain, you cannot call that the blessing of the Lord. I mean, I know this is stretching it, but just to make a point, you have pornography, whether it be Playboy magazine, Hustler magazine, but so you have these pornography magazines or movies or whatever, and they make a lot of money. The people that produce this garbage are very wealthy, and many of the models and the actors and actresses, if you want to call them that, are somewhat wealthy and well known. You can't call any of their wealth a blessing of the Lord because of the way they got it. The mob, the mafia, you know, they're known for criminal activity and they're wealthy. You can't say, oh look, God's blessed them through drugs, prostitution, racketeering, and so on, so on. You can't say that. That's not the blessing of the Lord. The blessing of the Lord comes righteously. And what James is saying is like, guys, let me kind of sum it up in this way. Do the right thing, work on yourself and work out of that righteousness, and God will bless you. Just be patient. Just keep doing what you know you're supposed to be doing, and God will bless you. So don't go out and try to step on people. Don't try to do things in an unrighteous manner. Don't try to do things that God would say, I'm opposed to that. Do it God's way and let Him bless you, and let Him bless you in His time. Because what I have found is sometimes it takes longer, okay? But the reason is because God's pulling pieces together. I'm just giving you a little bit of insight. Pulling pieces together. Those pieces might be people, it might be, you know, whatever, situations, businesses, whatever it might be. But He's pulling these pieces together so that when He blesses you, many others are blessed along with you, because you all work together for a common goal. And maybe it wasn't like you sat down and wrote up a blueprint or something and you all followed it together. It's just the way God moves and brings pieces together, even when we don't even understand it, so that when one is blessed, all is blessed, because that's what God really wants. He doesn't want to see just one. Now, He wants every one of us wealthy and successful. I believe this. But He doesn't want just one to be, say, the multi-billionaire, and then the other is just getting by. He wants us all to increase, where we have more than enough. And we can press in and press on and go and do what God has called us to do, because we all together increased. So it's not like God's withholding. What He's doing is He's bringing so many pieces and so many people up at the same time. He wants to do this with churches. He wants to do this with leaders. He wants to do this with business. And He wants to do this with people just, you know, like on the job. You and your co-workers, especially believers. So keep that in mind. It's not that God is withholding. He is bringing about all the pieces so that when it's launched, it not only blesses you, but it blesses many people, and it blesses future generations. If it's only money that you're after, well, then go make money. But if you're after the blessing of the Lord that's really going to change people's lives, then that might take a little bit. Okay, because remember, we're called to be world changers, not just money makers. Now, where was I? So again, James says this, be patient. I know, again, with some of us, myself included, that's often a four-letter word. But be patient and establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Now, I want to deal with that just a little bit, because even today we're dealing with this. You know, the coming of the Lord. When's Jesus coming back? The coming of the Lord. Let me give you a different perspective. James points out that we will need patience and our hearts established, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Okay, at hand. Okay, put out your hand. The coming of the Lord is right there. It's like here. It's now. It's coming. Okay. The book of James would have been written before AD 62. The reason we know that is because James was martyred in AD 62. So it would have been written before that. This means that James wrote this before the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. This is important because the destruction of the temple is referred to as the day of the Lord in many places and by many, okay? Or in the scriptures, I should say. Okay, so when he is saying, have your hearts established, for the coming of the Lord is at hand, he's talking about the destruction of the temple that they were all waiting for, that Jesus prophesied about in Matthew, was it 24, I believe. The word established here literally means to put in a firm place, to set fast, to fix, to strengthen, and make firm. He was saying, so have your hearts firm. And that's why he spoke about patience beforehand and doing things correctly, because they were looking for this time, the coming of the Lord. They maybe not knew everything, but they knew enough that God was about to do something big, okay? And James was the apostle in Jerusalem at the time, but he was martyred 8 years before the destruction of the temple. But he was still looking for it. He was still wondering what's really going to happen and what is this? You guys stay ready, be patient, be established in the Lord, because something big is about to happen. James is wanting his readers to be firmly established in the Lord and the things of God. Destruction was coming to Jerusalem and the Holy Temple. Their faith was going to be shaken in a serious manner. Okay, think about that. These believers need to be firmly established, immovable in the Lord, otherwise they would fall into great despair. Remember, the saints, the Christians at that time, as well as the Jews, and remember, James is writing to Jewish believers in the diaspora, those that are spread abroad. So he is writing them this, be established, because he knows something's coming. He may not be able to put his finger on when, but he knows it's coming soon, because Jesus, remember, said, this generation will see all these things. So James knew that the generation he was part of was going to see these things. Now, of course, he was martyred before it all happened, but the generation he was part of was going to see these things. 8 years after his death, these things happened. The very things that he's saying, you all need to be strengthened, you need to be established, you need to be patient, you need to, don't defraud. The whole reason why he's writing this is because he knew something big was about to break out, and they needed to be ready for it. They needed to be righteous. They needed to be found righteous. They needed to be found doing the right thing, not manipulating, not putting one another down, backbiting, murdering, all of these things. They needed to be right with the Lord. So, and it's the same for us today. Many people fall away when difficult times come, because remember, the temple was holy to them. Jew and Christian, Messianic believers and the Jews, it was holy to them. It was the place where they met God. Even the Jewish people, even Jesus went to the temple for temple services. Even Jesus was found there teaching. The early apostles, many of them were found there teaching. They would gather at the temple or on the temple grounds to meet with them and to meet with one another and such. So it was a holy place. And their holy place was about to be completely and utterly destroyed in the worst way. And James is saying, have your heart established. Can you imagine? It's hard. It would be hard enough to have someone come and burn down your church. You know, show up on Sunday morning and find a pile of ash and rubble. But the temple was much bigger than just a local church. What if they not only burnt down your church, but every church in your region, and the government declared you an outlaw, a lawbreaker, if you worship God? You know, you are breaking the law if you're a Christian. That's basically the type of thing, and it happened all really quick. So if your heart's not established, you're going to fall. Establish your hearts. Be patient. Wait. God's going to bless you, but there's things coming that you need to be established in. So let's listen to this. It's the same today again. Many people fall away when difficult times come. This shows that they weren't established in Christ.